No, no, I was going to ask something earlier.
Well, I think related to this question, I wanted to ask if you could describe some of the distinct possibilities, maybe in the advancements of the human being, or
So what distinct possibilities and
in the advancement of the human being,
in the
or
what of the human being?
advancement of the
yes.
human being, or of the political and civilizational possibilities that emerge distinctly from this experience you're describing of being formed in a Black social system, being, formed in the cradle of that system.
Well, I can tell this is very important, and this relates to the intellectual, the artist, because out of this, out of limited resources, of course, we had the church, we had the Black colleges, we had our families. There would be distinct groups. I mean, not groups, but would emerge, and this was a pattern of the organic intellectual, the autodidact. She or he would either be, heavily into the most advanced music like jazz, or he or she would be into Black history or philosophy. And they were not college or university trained, but they were autodidacts and they were organic. And, and I don't know completely how to describe it, but they almost occupied a place of a priesthood, of they knew, they had knowledge, and people would say, yeah, he's real smart, he's very smart, and he or she would be honored, I mean, we couldn't, put any big authority on them, but at the level of ordinary people, the pursuit of ideas and art was not seen as anything trivial. Now, of course, you had the church, which was a more formal authorization, but the church, and sometimes the theology and ministry of the church, did not answer the questions of the grassroots of people. And so you would have, and I know around here, well, where did he come from? But he was just from a few blocks away. But he would always have all these books or all these record albums with music you wouldn't hear on the radio. And then out of this in Philly, and Philadelphia is very, I know for me what I saw, you had dance companies emerge. And I remember, as a small kid, our mother put us in a class with this woman who seemed to be so huge. We were little kids. And she was teaching tap dancing. And I could never figure out this big woman tap, and I never learned too much about tap dancing, by the way. But Philadelphia was a center of tap dancing. And the Nicholas brothers are from Philadelphia. Right. You can look them up. Very, very famous acrobatic tap dancers. But, so, you knew it, you could see it, you knew it had to be fought for, or at least that's what was conveyed. And oftentimes we knew that these bright stars would not go very far beyond our community, but we didn't see that necessarily as a tragedy. Because it's not until after the civil rights movement that you had any Black students going to white colleges, and for the most part, black people have never felt comfortable praying in white churches. You know, for a black person to be a Catholic it's a wow, you know. And there were black Catholics, but even the Catholic Church was segregated. So you'd have a black parish of just black people, but most of us were Baptists or AME or something like that. But we saw, at least the way I can think about it and understood, we saw possibilities within our own group, within the black community. And then, of course, as you have mentioned, Poor, those black artists and thinkers who could get to Europe. And then, of course, some went as far as Japan. And they could be more free. Their music, their art in particular, could be appreciated. Here, it was always this thing, and again, I don't understand what produces white people. No matter what black people produce, it was always a joke, inferior. Oh, they're doing rhythm and blues because they can't do Bach. Oh, they like Ellington because they can't understand Beethoven, you know. And for them, the icon of music was the Academy of Music and an orchestra with a old white man standing in front of everybody with a baton, you know, which I still don't understand. Why you need that man standing up there if you got the paper right in front of you? You know? But yeah, I don't know whether I answered the question adequately, but everything is, everybody's poor for the most part. So even if the laws or whatever said you could do certain things, you still couldn't do it because you were poor, you didn't have enough money. High unemployment, you know. So everything is conditioned, not determined, but conditioned by the color line. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, just briefly, I think I asked that question because Du Bois's idea of a civilization in potentiality.
Yeah.
I mean, it really sounds like you're describing that in the concrete. Yeah. Like a different type of social relationship, a new type of language, a distinct achievement or ethic or aesthetic, you know,
I agree with
of
that.
work, of culture, of art. And in some ways my question is simple, which is like, well, what does it mean, you know? And
what has it meant and what does it mean for the future?
yes.
You know,
but
I'm sorry, forgive me.
Because this thing that you're saying at the end, in terms of how the genius of, for example, these musicians was further recognized in Europe. I mean, I think what you're speaking to is how these advancements, had they been unobstructed or unfiltered by the white system, you know, had they not been obstructed by the white system, I mean, they really speak to the world, and the colored world especially.
Yeah, there's no, and we kind of sensed that. Everybody kind of sensed it, especially when word got back. Ray Charles was in Europe or Japan, or Dizzy Gillespie was in South America, and they were warmly received. And you know, we kind of knew that our art, our dance, and so much had surpassed white people. We felt that, and that they were intentionally holding us back because they were envious of us, that once we realized, because they stereotyped our physical characteristics, that the blacker you were, the more primitive, the more ugly, we would define, this is in Hollywood, you know, and in magazines and everything, we had to overcome this imaging of us as ugly. And therefore, the lighter skinned black person was the more beautiful black person. That our lips, our noses were a signifier of ugliness and inferiority. And there weren't two ways about it. We were ugly. We were inferior. We were biologically less intelligent. We were where we were because we were inferior. It wasn't the law. It wasn't white people. It was us. And again, I'll say, I am not exaggerating. We grew up with them saying these things about us, and us knowing they're saying these things about us. And, one of the things in the black world is always, this thing of so many of us accept that narrative about us, about us. And so we'd be debating, brother, you need to get your head together. What you mean? That's the Nation of Islam arises in a way to say the black man is divine and the white man is the devil. It flips it, you know what I'm saying? And that narrative, changing the narrative, performed miracles because people who were in prison, who were in the gutter, and alcoholics and heroin addicts, once they embrace another narrative, another set of gods, it frees them from that. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, but we paid just like with the other thing, growing up, because my mother would work and my grandmother would pick us up from school, which was not far from here, and we would sit in this room and have a little television, and we'd come home from school and we'd look at television, and they had, you probably heard of Dick Clark, An American Bandstand. Well, it started here in Philadelphia, out at 46 and Market, and it was all white people. We couldn't get in there. And we would sit, my grandmother, my brother, and I sit here and laugh at them because they couldn't dance. You know what I'm saying? And that's why, just going forward, we had to have Soul Train, which ultimately outdid anything American Bandstand could imagine. But, again, you can find, but then you can find but not defeated. Many casualties of the system of white supremacy. It's an interesting thing. I think, because I'm a sociologist, I think about numbers. I think there's a pattern where 20% of black people are direct casualties of white supremacy, are disabled by it, are made mentally ill by it. About 20%. Some of it is very open, like, if we walk down, let's say we walk into Center City, and, I'm often looking at the physical types of black people. First of all, you will notice that disproportionately the homeless and people in despair are darker skinned. Check it out. And so I like to look at them, their limbs, their legs, and it can tell you a lot because a lot of times their legs are still strong, in the ways that a lot of black people have these very, not huge muscular legs, but these legs of runners and athletes. And you look at some of these men, you look at their legs, and you can say, I know he ran track. And you just say, I wonder what his story is, or her story. You know, and you look at their faces, their skin, and you can see it in the women. Beautiful skin. And that black skin can remain strong and kind of vibrant in spite of a lot of things that happen. And you know, that was a casualty of white supremacist system. And I estimate that about 20% of us are direct casualties, like casualties of war. And it might be going up. And I haven't really thought about it in terms of children and predicting. But this, when you deconstruct it, and you know, like what we're trying to do now, and it's always a lot to overcome. You can't just go in and expect white people to treat you fairly. Every time you go in anywhere they are, expect that you're going to be treated wrong. You know, that's a given. And it's normalized. You don't even have to think about it. A lot of times we'll say it like, you know, like all this, they're going to do away with DEI and affirmative action. Well, wait a minute now. That's all y'all have been based upon. Your whole thing has been, you know, holding one group back, in particular black people, and giving everything to your own. I guess that's another thing. And this is why the black gods are so important, and black religion is so important, because, you know, it is, you know, separate moral system. In spite of everything, you have never, well, maybe one or two, but black people have not called for mass violence against white people. Matter of fact, black people have not even called for generalized hatred of white people, in spite of all of this. And black people would generally wish the best and are very empathetic towards white suffering. If white people suffer, black people can empathize with it. I don't think that exists on the other side. Black people tend to be warmer. Well, it's all in the music. White people tend to be cold. At least that's the way we see it. You know, if I look at a white woman, a man, their face, especially after a certain age, their facial structures harden. Have you ever noticed that? Now, a lot of that has to do with, I guess, the skin is dehydrating, but you can almost, forgive me if this is not scientific enough, but you could look at a white person past 55 or 60. Their face becomes a death mask. Check it out. Their skin becomes tight, etc. And maybe it has something to do with the moral and psychological quality of their lives. Forgive me if I'm talking.
No, I feel like you're going through a lot of things that we had prepared and wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I think has come up that I just want to draw out a little bit more is like you're talking about the color line and how devastating it is, and how on the one hand the Black social system is the best way of protecting Black people through like different institutions like the church, the work culture, the art. All of this is basically to lift Black people up. But then at the same time, there is still like the actual devastation of the color line, like what it does, and how, yeah, like there are many casualties of that. And so I wanted to ask, like as a young person, what was it like as a child actually growing up in that? Where you said like you had early memories of like asking your grandmother, like, oh, are we colored people? Like, what does that mean? And you went to like more integrated like middle schools and high schools. And yeah, how did you navigate that? Like, and then also like who in the community I guess helped you to also understand what you were going through? Like your mother, like people in the church, other people that you would talk to. And basically like recognizing that there was a color line and then understanding like how you wanted to actually navigate it in the world.
Maybe I'll add some of what I'm thinking to this because it's along the same line. Is this question that Nouri's asking at the end is what was that, like how did you recognize that this was something that was not just a temporary part of life, but how life is defined for Black people by the world? And because Du Bois talks about his own experience of when it first imprinted on his consciousness that he was different than all these other people all these other children he was seeing who in no ways were better than him in anything. And then the other part just I want to add to that is this question of segregation. Like Philadelphia, I don't know if this is true, you should correct me if I'm wrong, but seems like historically Philadelphia has been one of the most segregated cities, and it continues to be. But then somehow segregation or like lawful segregation is seen like a southern almost thing. And going back to what we were talking about the south and the north, where in the north there was still this segregation, very concretely there was segregation, but it wasn't through law, it was through the human relation or race contact between Black and white people. And in particular, I think what effect that had on children, on the education of children. And in some ways...
Could you remember those questions? Because I didn't describe my paternal side.
Oh, yeah. Also, you should say names, Doc.
Give us names and dates when you can.
About my paternal side?
Just about anything.
Oh, yeah.
Parents, mother.
Let me just do my... Because, I have a Portuguese name, last name, and that's because my father is an immigrant from the Cape Verde Islands, which is part of Africa. And I think they arrived here, his mother and father, and one sister and two brothers, so it was 4 children, mother and father. They arrived here about 1920. My paternal grandfather was a farmer and a whaler. He, whaled. Now, I speculate that with the decline of the use of whale oil for lighting, for not candles, but for lamps, and maybe for other things, that industry kind of dried up. He was also a farmer in the Cape Verde Islands. How much of a farmer, I don't know. But they came here and end up in Massachusetts. And for a while, my grandfather and I guess his children were farmers on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And as part of this insular community, they didn't call themselves Black, they called themselves Cape Verdeans. So they had never fully identified with the black community or the black struggle. And even up to this day, I think they still have issues with that. But my father, I guess in his early 20s maybe, left the New England states, Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and came to Philadelphia. And this opened the door to his being integrated into the black community, the black social system. And so he began to take on characteristics of black people, or to have empathy towards black people. But the other thing is that his first language is not English. It's what we call Creole. It is that mixture of West African and Portuguese. The Cape Verde Islands were also one of the stop-off points in the slave trade from continental Africa to the Western Hemisphere. And, but then those who did not go through the slave trade remained there, and it was, I can only speculate by the way they look. They tend to look like, in certain physical features, like people in the Dominican Republic. They're much lighter than the West Africans in Senegal, you know, and tend to have more features of white people, even in this country, than of black people. Not all. My father was a little bit darker than me, but their hair was not as what we call kinky or curly as most black people. So they had, like, I have cousins, their hair is just like yours, poor, and your complexion, you know. So they had language, and then they were Catholic, and they had different food and a different history. They were immigrants, they were not enslaved as we were here. They did not go through the anti-slavery struggle, yada, yada, yada. So they saw themselves as distinct and saw their pathway to opportunity as assimilation, not struggle. My father comes here, and I guess after several jobs, he ends up on the waterfront, which was a booming industry after World War II. And he openly talks about himself as black, and is very critical of his brothers and relatives still in the New England states for not accepting that they are black people. You know what I'm saying? So my father in some ways became a race man. Although with the name Monteiro and a kind of social presentation that was not like a Southern black man, there was certain, you know, I don't know, window of opportunities, certain things that he could avail himself of by not being seen as black. It's quite interesting. For me, it is this mixture that at a point associates me with Africa and the African independence movement, and Amilcar Cabral, who is from the same island in the Cape Verde Islands that my father is from, you know. So I'm identifying in my 20s with the liberation movement against Portuguese colonialism, because Cape Verde is a Portuguese colony and linked to Guinea-Bissau, and in another way linked to Senegal. But my father, I always noticed there was a nuanced difference between he and my mother's brothers. You know, because, you know, my grandfather, his father was white, so he was very light-skinned. So one of my mother's brothers was far more light-skinned than my father. But my uncle, who was light-skinned, was far more black in the sense of that identity of resistance and so on than my father. But my father joins black churches, he marries a black woman, and lives among black people as a black man. And this is, I just wanted to throw that part in. Mm-hmm.
Wait, give us some names. What was your father's name and your mother's?
Oh, my father's name was John Monteiro.
Wow, John.
His middle name was Barris, B-A-R-R-I-S. John Monteiro. He would, like I say, Monteiro, I don't know, I guess he was trying to, I don't know, be a little, you know, suave. He would always say, Monteiro. Now it's Portuguese, so you can't pronounce it like it's Spanish. So it could T-E-I, you could say, like I would say Monteiro, you know, I guess conflate the E and I, but he would say Monteiro, more Portuguese. But they didn't speak Portuguese, they spoke Creole. And they ate Creole food, which was more African, more rice-based, you know. They do have a lot of characteristics of West Africans. I've never been there. My daughter has, and one of my granddaughters have been there. I have not been there.
Is it okay if I turn these lights on?
Go ahead.
Is it this one?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, that's the other side. I just wanted to.
Yeah, that's important because what you're saying.
Because there's a lot of things about me that have that kind of other side. You know, first of all, you know, I have to tell you all this. Growing up, I didn't want this name, Monteiro. I wanted my name to be Smith or Jones or Johnson or Harris, something like other black people. I didn't want to be seen, you know, as a kid, to be seen as something different, or even to be seen as a Hispanic or Puerto Rican. I didn't want that. I wanted, you know, but then that's one side of it. But then, you know, coming to know the world and the liberation movements in Africa, you know, being able to identify with Amilcar Cabral, great revolutionary leader, it, you know, gave us a broader sense of things. But then I think, without knowing it, having this Cape Verdean side, this Portuguese/African side, has made me less narrow nationalist. If that makes sense. It would be, I don't know how to be a cultural or narrow nationalist in this regard. Yeah, there's some other aspects of this that I don't always know about.
Could I ask one more question?
And then we'll get back to questions that you all were asking, Nori. I forget them exactly, but we'll go back here.
I wanted to ask if you could share about your mother and who she was, and how she influenced you, you know, and what her teachings were. Yeah.
Well, poor Bessie, pictures of my mother.
Her name was
Almena, A-L-M-E-N-A, which I think shows an Islamic presence. Al-A-L, Mina, Al-Mina, which is Arabic, because over 20% of the enslaved Africans brought here were already converted Muslims. So her name seems to me to reflect Islamic presence in our family, you know, and it is not Almina, that's the English, but it is Almina, the Arabic. You guys might want to look that up. She was, it's hard to talk about your mother because you only have good things to say, but there are only good things to say about her. And you could, to verify what I'm saying, you could ask a lot of other women who knew her and who know me, but knew her better than they know me. Like Zakia, a lot of other women who were around her because she was a soap maker, she was a quilt maker, she sewed, made her own clothes, and she was a member of the church, and a gardener. This neighborhood had fallen apart. You know how they do black people. See, that's just to even say it like that, you know how they do black people. That's a default position. So I don't have to describe the whole thing if I'm talking to black people. Like I'm going to say, well, they let the neighborhood deteriorate. There were empty lots all over the place. I don't have to say all that. All I have to say is, you know how they do black people. Oh, yeah. So we all know what I'm talking about. But anyway, there were all of these empty lots around her here. And she and a couple of other ladies took those empty lots, I can show you right down here and other places, and turned them into community gardens. There was a Philadelphia Horticultural Society that were doing some things, mainly upper class white women. I don't know all that they did, but at some point they began to support community gardens as a way to address some of the blight and stuff that was happening. And you ever hear the William Way Center down in, yes you have, the William Way down on, what is it, around close to Broad Street on Pine Street, the William Way Center, W.A.Y. Well, William Way, who became maybe iconic in the gay community at the time of AIDS, but he was also a part of the Philadelphia Urban Gardening Program. And they would bring compost and mulch and even seeds for these urban community gardens. And this was back, so my mother was this kind of gardener. She managed this house, which is a large house, and many people living here. But unlike her brothers and sisters, she never went into the partying thing. You know, coming up, people get into, and back then, if you partied a lot, you drank a lot. You know, so my mother never drank or smoked, although her brothers and sisters did. And in this respect, she was looked up to. And if you talk to some of these women today, I'll give you some names maybe, they'll tell you just what I'm saying, that these women of my generation looked up to her almost as a mother figure, and they wanted to be around her while she was making soap, while she was cooking and baking or gardening. And I sometimes think these were women who wanted a mother like my mother. I've even had some problems in dating because, they see how much, and probably that has maybe corrupted me. I'm like Luther Vandross, he wanted his music to be perfect, and he was always looking for the perfect lover. And, without knowing it sometimes, why should I even try to get married? I'm not going to find my mother, And then I had my mother for so long that, what could a woman do? I got enough love. I don't need, this is a whole different level. Then I had all this other stuff going on. But, and this is real, when I became a communist, when I opposed the war in Vietnam, when I was arrested, my mother never abandoned me, criticized me, denounced me, at all. That may be part of this lineage coming out of South Carolina and that Second Civil War, where, without saying it, and she wasn't one of these, just like the photo you see, that's the way she was, very mild, very pretty, had the hair just like her, and trying to see, well, maybe closer, a little lighter than you, Pooh, and my brother and I, we never felt anything but love and encouragement, and I guess we all knew that we're faced with this system. Now, my father did not have the same sensibility that she had. He always had an idea of assimilating, to talk more like white people, because I guess it's because they spoke Portuguese or Creole, they were more predisposed to speak English like white people, where we speak it more like Southern black people. You know what I'm saying? He always tried to manage how he navigated relationships with white people, so he doesn't offend, now he would stand up, he wasn't like Uncle Tom or anything, but you don't, just like, most black men, you're not going, be insulting anything, but you're not going to, don't get too close to me. You send off that kind of energy all the time, where he didn't want to do that. He didn't want the white man to see him like they saw most black men. But my mother, it was never any opposition, and very proud of us. And when we went to Lincoln University, of course, we were the first ones in our family to go to a university. And sometimes she would drive down and bring us chicken and stuff, fried chicken. And my first girlfriend, her father and mother, her father in particular, was unnecessarily strict. So she wanted to come down to homecoming at Lincoln, and her father wouldn't let her go. And my mother, and she always reminds me of this even up to this day, my mother took her down to Lincoln. And we were only 17, 18 years old. But, and that's, I guess there's a lot else to say. But one thing I really admire about my mother, how she managed this house and the people that lived in it. Because they were working people, but they were also drinkers or alcoholics, So she had to set boundaries for them. And they respected it, And they had to pay, like Mr. George rented a room $6 a week, you know, and they would come home from work on Friday. Here, Mies, here's my rent, you know. They called her Mies, you know. And she divorced my father. He didn't divorce her. And and then I've told you all this story before. At some point, he wanted to get back with my mother. And every weekend we would spend a weekend with my father. And he lived up on in Tioga, you know, where my daughter, the house right next door. And it was really a place where a neighborhood that black people were just able to move into. And he was married to a school teacher, so they could handle that. He working on the waterfront, she being a school teacher. But anyway, we would spend the weekends with him. And so my father wanted to get back with my mother. Did I tell you all this?
Even though he was with somebody?
I don't think he was married
okay,
at this time. My father's been married so much, I guess that's why I don't get married. I said, man, damn, it doesn't work for you. Give it up, man. But my father, God. But anyway, it's his Catholicism. But my brother and I, we were little guys, and he would say, you know, if you boys get your mother to come back with me, and we could get back together, and we'll move to the suburbs, and, you know, I'll get you all a horse to ride. And we said, oh my God. So he would bring us home, and we came in the house, and, you know, my mother would, you know, be giving us it was Sunday night, you know, and we said, Mommy, Daddy said if you all got back together that he will buy us a horse. And I'm not making this up, man. And in that room, you know, see that dining room, you know, with that chair? My mother said, I want to tell you all this right now. She said, I didn't leave your father because of you all. I left him because of me. And I'm not going back to him. We never raised that conversation again. She said, I'm not, you know, I left because of me. And see, you see that Catholic hierarchy, that patriarchy? Whether she had the language of patriarchy, she wasn't, and he wasn't going to humiliate her, talk to her, holler at her anyway. You do this, and I want my dinner when all that old nickel. She didn't, and once, it was liberating for my brother and I, because we never came up hearing our parents argue, or man arguing with my mother and telling her she was in charge. You know? I mean, and that's why I resonate with what Nanditha's saying. Yeah, she's right. You got to loosen those bonds of patriarchy, and divorce should always be an option and should be taken when necessary, because it's better for the children. And here we are, two boys. And I don't have that image of manhood. I really don't, because I'm brought up under a woman. To have a man come in the house, well, where is this at? Or if he ain't feeling right on one day, I don't, you know, and everybody got to, you know, cower and fear. Never had that. The only fear we had is our mother saying if we didn't do something, she was going to spank us. She never did. And my brother and I would, no, Mommy, please, don't, we won't do it again. And the only other thing, we had our tasks that, you know, around the house we had to do. And so we were always on Saturday going, this is when we're in junior high school and high school, we were part of all city choir, and then, you know, just doing everything. One day this. So every Saturday, we would clean the house. But my brother and I, since we had to be at all city choir at about 9:30 or 10, we would have to get up so early to do our chores around the house. So we started doing it on Friday. So we didn't have to, but she organized this house, and she organized us. And I would have to say, and my uncles lived here, her two brothers. And I don't, that's why I do not, I mean, really, I don't have an image of a male patriarchy. I really don't. Because my image is of a woman running things. And running them well, in fact, you know. You asked me some other questions.
Wait, I just to finish off because what you're also saying is your mother also gave you what you needed to understand what a black man needs to be. Black woman gave it to you.
Let me tell you something. Now, I can't say I understand what a black woman wants from a man. I'm not going to say that, you know, and I'm not going to say that because I was raised by a woman, I became not a man. You know, like this narrative, you hear a lot of cultural nationalists, we need more men and men and men. Okay, we do, but we need more women too. And I'm not one, in fact, I take the opposite position, that it's better for young men to be raised by women. It doesn't make them feminine. It doesn't make a man gay to be raised by a woman. Now, my brother was gay and I'm not gay. And why he was gay, I have no idea. You know what I'm saying? But it didn't make me gay. I mean, because I always loved women. I ain't going to lie about that. I ain't going to talk to them, but I like women. I'm more about women. You know, that doesn't mean all women, but then I'm always, because of my mother, I think, like I said, I often quote Virginia Woolf, a woman needs a space, a room of her own. And I think the most unhappy women are the women that do not have their own space. That's my opinion. And I think it has everything to do with my mother, where I mean, not what she said, she didn't tell me this, but just seeing her. And once she divorced my father, she never, I don't think she ever wanted to be married again. She may have dated a couple of men, which she kind of kept that from us, man. We never, because, you know, it's always, we don't want my mother to have a boyfriend. I don't know, but she never wanted to be married. I don't think ever wanted to be married again. It was one time, the experience was not what she wanted or what it should be, and it was very interesting.
Yeah, the reason I was asking that question is because what you were touching upon with, you know, the whole feminist narrative of like, even what you were saying is that black women understand black men. They understand the angle. Definitely. They're raised by black women also. So yeah, that's
definitely. Definitely. I think most black women see most feminist narratives as excessive and anti-black. And if they have sons, they definitely don't go with it.